The life of Venerable Mahākassapa, foremost in perfect conduct. In the Anguttara Nikaya, Ekakanipata specifically, the Buddha declared, Etadagam bhikkhunam, apiktatanam, foremost among my monks in fewness of wants and perfect conduct. Mahākassapa. This was not poetic praise but a formal designation grounded in the Buddha's omniscient knowledge of his disciples' attainments. The life of Mahākassapa is preserved not only in this sutta, but also in the Vinaya Pitaka's Kulavagga, which records his leadership at the First Buddhist Council. His personal story, however, comes primarily from two authoritative Theravada commentaries, the Manaratha Purani, the commentary on the Anguttara Nikaya, and the Paramathadipani, the commentary on the Theragatha. These are not later legends but carefully transmitted accounts accepted across the Orthodox tradition.
Imagine a young man so devoted to truth that even his parents' deepest wish, his marriage, could not sway him, unless it met a condition so extraordinary it seemed impossible. His name was Pipphali. Born in the Brahmin village of Mahatitha near Rajagaha in the kingdom of Magadha, he was the son of Kapala and Sumana Devi. From childhood, he showed a rare depth of character, calm, reflective, and deeply committed to Punna. When he turned 20, his parents gently urged him to marry. But Pipphali had already made up his mind. He would care for them, yes, but one day he would renounce the world entirely. To spare his parents' pain while holding firm to his resolve, he devised a plan. He commissioned a life-size statue of a woman, crafted entirely from gold. Every detail was perfected, her posture, her grace, the jewelry, the garlands. Then he told his parents, if you can find a woman who matches this statue exactly in form, complexion, and dignity, I will marry her. If not, I will never marry. His mother, wise and intuitive, believed such a woman must exist, perhaps from shared acts of punna in past lives. She called 8 learned Brahmins, honored them with food, and asked, does such a woman live in this world? They studied the signs and said, yes, but we do not know where. So they set out with the golden statue on a cart, traveling through noble cities until they reached Sagala, famed for its beauty. There by the riverbank they displayed the statue, and fate intervened. If you're wondering where Sagala was, it's in the region that today includes parts of Pakistan and Iran. In ancient times, it was famous for its beautiful women, but nowadays that may no longer be the case, since the area is now predominantly Muslim. Back to the story. Nearby lived a 16-year-old girl named Bada Kapilani, radiant beyond compare. Her body naturally emitted light, even in total darkness. Her chamber needed no lamp. When her maids saw the golden statue, they mistook it for her. One cried out, "Mistress, what are you doing here?" only to recoil in surprise when she touched cold metal. The Brahmins overheard and rushed forward. The maids proudly declared, "Our Lady is 1,000 times more beautiful." Convinced, the Brahmins followed them home. Bada's parents of the respected Koseya Gotra saw the proposal as perfectly matched in lineage, wealth, and virtue. They accepted. Thus, two destined for renunciation were united, not by desire but by kama and punna.
This story appears in the Paramathadipani in the Dhammapada Atthakatha, not as myth but as part of the canonical biography explaining how 2 future arahants entered worldly life before transcending it. Importantly, both Pipphali and Bada Kapilani later became fully awakened disciples. Their marriage was celibate from the start, a mutual agreement to live as siblings. Soon after, they both went forth separately, each attaining arahantship. This underscores a profound truth. Even in samsara, those rooted in punna move toward liberation, not away from it.
Mahākassapa's life was never about comfort. He wore rag robes, lived in forests, and ate only alms food, even when offered royal meals. His discipline was so pure that after the Buddha's passing, the entire Sangha chose him to lead the First Council, preserving the Dhamma for generations. He wasn't just a monk, he was the living embodiment of restraint, integrity, and selfless service, and that is why the fourfold assembly, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, honored him with the title Araya Kassapa Sangha Vuddhi Akariya, the noble elder Kassapa, the teacher who uplifts the Sangha. This is not imagination. It is Dhamma history, preserved, verified, and worthy of reflection.
The mutual renunciation of Pipphali and Bada Kapilani is not found in the suttas, but it is firmly established in the Theravada commentarial tradition. It appears in 3 key sources: the Paramathadipani commentary on the Theragatha, the Dhammapada Atthakatha in the story of Bada Kapilani, and is referenced in the Manaratha Purani, the commentary on the Anguttara Nikaya. These are not folk tales. They are part of the orthodox biographical framework used for centuries to explain how two future arahants declared by the Buddha as Etadaga, or foremost, prepared their minds for liberation even while living as householders.
After the families accepted the marriage proposal, both Pipphali and Buddha were deeply troubled, not because they disliked each other, but because neither wished to marry at all. Each believed the other was eager for worldly life. So in secret they wrote letters pleading with the other to find someone else, and to pursue ordination instead. Pipphali wrote, "Dear Mahakassapa, please do not agree to marry me. I intend to go forth as a monk. If you heed this, you will avoid future sorrow." At the very same time Buddha wrote, "Dear Pipphali, I too have resolved to renounce the world. Do not let this decision bring you regret." Their messengers met on the road. Curious, they opened both letters and were stunned. Here were two beings perfectly aligned in heart, yet unknowingly trying to set each other free. Fearing the grief of their parents, the servants made a bold choice. They tore up both letters and forged a new one, expressing joy and acceptance of the marriage. And so the wedding proceeded, not as a union of desire, but as an act of compassion for their families. Though married, they lived as spiritual siblings. Each night, they placed a garland of flowers between them on the bed, so even accidental contact would be known. Buddha once said, "Whichever of us disturbs the garland, we'll know lust has arisen in their mind." But morning after morning, the garland remained untouched. They never smiled flirtatiously, never spoke with affection. Their home was a vessel of restraint, not romance. Why is that so? Because both had just been reborn from the Brahma realm. Beings who descend from the Brahma worlds rarely feel desire for sensual pleasure, even when born as humans, as it's not part of their natural disposition. In contrast, someone reborn into human life from the animal realm often has strong cravings for sensual enjoyment, especially sexual pleasure. Years passed. Then both parents of Pipphali passed away. He inherited vast wealth, 80 kotis, 12 yojanas of land, 60 reservoirs, 14 herds of elephants, enough to rival a king. One day, inspecting his fields, he saw crows tearing apart worms churned up by the plow. He asked the workers, "To whom does the unwholesome karma of this killing belong?" They replied, "To you, master, you own the land and command the work." In that moment, Pipphali saw the truth. What use is this wealth if it binds me to Papa, the unwholesome results of karma? Meanwhile, back at home, Pada watched crows peck insects from sesame seeds she'd ordered dried. When told the karma fell on her, she reflected, even a little wealth brings suffering. How can I lift my head above samsara if I cause harm, even indirectly? That evening, after a royal meal, they sat alone. Pipphali gently said, "Sister Pada, I give you all my wealth. I will go forth as a monk." Pada clasped her hands in relief. "Brother Pipphali, wait. I too have longed to ordain. I had planned to give everything to you." In that instant, they saw eye to eye, not as husband and wife, but as fellow travelers on the path. They sent for ochre robes, shaved each other's heads, and stood together in the robes of renunciance. And with one voice they declared, "If there are arahants in the world, our going forth is dedicated to them."
This declaration, though not a direct quote from a sutta, perfectly reflects the spirit of Saccā faith in the Triple Gem as seen in the Vinaya and Apadana literature, recorded in the Anguttara Nikaya. Their story teaches us that true renunciation isn't born of hatred for the world, but from clear seeing karma, seeing suffering, and seeing the way out.
Pipphali and Buddha didn't flee from life. They walked through it with eyes wide open. And when the time came, they let go, not with bitterness, but with gratitude, clarity, and mutual support. That is the mark of those destined for awakening.
Every detail in this account comes from the Paramatthaddhapani, Dhammapada Atstakatha, and Manaratha Purani texts that have shaped the Theravada understanding of the great disciples for over 1,500 years. This is not fiction. It is Dhamma biography preserved to inspire, instruct, and remind us liberation is possible even for those born into the greatest wealth if the heart is ready.
Walking away not just from wealth, but from an entire world that once defined you. From palaces, servants, noble lineage, even marriage. Not out of anger, not out of sorrow, but because you saw it clearly. The whole world is burning. This is the story of two beings, Pipphali and Mahakassapa, who chose liberation over legacy, and whose renunciation was so profound, the earth itself trembled. They left at dawn, alms bowls slung over their shoulders, robes simple, steps quiet. None of the palace servants recognized them, so transformed were they by resolve. But when they reached the edge of the estate, the bonded laborers looked up and wept. Master, you abandon us, you leave us without refuge. Pipphali and Pada paused. With kindness they replied, we do not abandon you out of neglect. It is because the three realms blaze like a burning hut that we must go. If we tried to free each of you one by one, even after 100 years, we could not liberate you all. Therefore we grant you full freedom. Bathe, shave your heads, go, become free people. And so with hearts lightened by compassion, they walked on.
Their decision reflects a profound truth in the Dhamma. Personal liberation is not selfish. It is the only true path to helping others. As the Buddha taught in the Samannaphala Sutta, one who purifies themselves becomes a refuge for many. And though this exact dialogue isn't in the suttas, the principle aligns with the Buddha's emphasis on self-mastery as the foundation of compassion.
Pipphali walked ahead. Hada followed behind. But as they neared a crossroads, Pipphali stopped. He turned to her and said gently, Sister Bada, if people see a noble woman like you walking behind a renunciant like me, they may misunderstand our relationship, and wrong views can lead others into suffering. To protect both them and ourselves, let us part here. You take one path, I will take the other. Hada with perfect clarity bowed her head. Indeed, venerable brother, even without a teacher we know that attachment, even the appearance of it, can cloud the path. You go on the right-hand path. I as a woman shall take the left. Then she circumambulated him 3 times, bowed in the 4 directions, and raised her palms in Agnoli. For countless lifetimes we have walked together. Today, though our hearts are full, we part not in sorrow, but in the shared wish for true freedom. And at that very moment the earth trembled, mountains swayed, lightning split the sky, to the purity of their resolve, their vast punna and the parami they had nurtured over eons.
At that time, the Buddha was in the Gandhakutsi at Veluvana Monastery in Rajagaha. He heard the quake, and with his Kutupapatanyana, knowledge of beings passing away and rebirth, and Pabanivasanasatinana, recollection of past lives, he knew its cause. As recorded in the Paramattadipani and Apadana, the Buddha declared, Pipphali and Badakapalani have renounced their vast wealth and gone forth out of devotion to the Tathagata. The earth shakes due to their immense virtue. Though capable of sending any elder, the Buddha chose to go alone, walking 3 gavatas about 18 kilometers to the Bahuputaka Nigroda tree between Rajagaha and Nalanda, a site mentioned in the Vinaya Kulavaga.
There, beneath the great banyan tree, the Buddha sat not as an ordinary monk but as one who had fully awakened. His body bore the 32 marks of a Mahaparisa, naturally and effortlessly, as they always do in a fully enlightened one. A soft, golden light radiated from him, 80 cubits in every direction, gentle yet all-pervading, like the dawn embracing the world. Even the banyan tree seemed to respond. Its white bark glowed warmly, its blue-green leaves shimmered with gold, and its red fruit took on a luminous hue as if the whole earth bowed in silent reverence. From afar, Pipphali saw this serene, radiant figure. His heart stirred not with excitement, but with deep recognition. Though he did not yet know this was the Buddha, he saw one who was utterly free, an arahant liberated from all defilements. He walked forward, knelt, and prostrated fully. Mahakassapa bowed deeply, so fully that his forehead touched the earth. Then, with a heart both humble and resolute, his heart was pure, filled with lifetimes of punna restraint and longing for liberation. Later, the wise monks who preserved the Dhamma explained, when a person of such great virtue offers deep reverence, that act carries tremendous karmic power. If such homage were directed towards someone not yet free from defilements, someone who is not an arahant, that person could not bear its weight. Their head would split into 7 pieces, not from anger, but because an unliberished mind and body simply cannot receive such pure devotion. Even the earth would tremble. But when Mahakassapa bowed to the Buddha, not a single thread of the Buddha's robe moved. He looked up and asked, "Who are you, venerable sir, and do you know the path of great liberation?" The Buddha replied, "Tathagata know the path of liberation clearly. In the Paramattadipani, the commentary adds a tender teaching. Right there, beneath the banyan tree, the Buddha gave him ordination. And then with great care he gave him 3 guiding principles, drawn from the essence of the Dhamma, as recorded in the Samyutta Nikaya. 1. Uphold hiri and atapa, moral shame and fear of wrongdoing. 2. Listen carefully to every wholesome teaching, reflect on it, and live by it. 3. Never abandon mindfulness of the body. These were the foundation for preserving the Dhamma, the very qualities that would later make Mahakassapa the pillar of the First Council. From that moment, Pipphali was no more. He became Venerable Mahākassapa, the one who would carry the robe, the discipline, and the Dhamma itself into the future. After his ordination, Venerable Mahākassapa walked respectfully behind the Buddha. With psychic power, they moved swiftly, covering great distances in moments until they neared a resting place. The Buddha slowed, as if preparing to sit. Without hesitation, Mahakassapa removed his outer robe, one of the two he wore, and spread it on the ground as a seat. The Buddha sat. Then with gentle hands, he stroked the cloth up and down as if acknowledging its purity. To those who do not understand the Dhamma, this might seem like desire. The Buddha saw a fine robe and wanted it, but it was nothing of the kind. Seeing the Buddha's gesture, Mahakassapa bowed and said, "My Lord, I offer this robe to you." The Buddha replied, "Well done, Kassapa, and I shall give you my own robe in return. But know this, it is very heavy. Can you bear to wear it?" Mahakassapa understood instantly. This was not about cloth. It was about the weight of the entire Sangha, the preservation of the Dhamma, and the responsibility to uphold strict conduct after the Buddha's passing. He answered with quiet resolve, "I will do my best, my Lord. Please do not worry." The Buddha then said, "This robe is not for all. It is not public. It is private, given only to one who walks the path of few ones. From this day you must follow 3 things I have taught with utmost care." Mahakassapa accepted without hesitation. Tears of joy filled his eyes, not from pride, but from the depth of the trust placed in him. They exchanged robes. This was not a coronation of worldly power. It was the silent appointment of the one who would safeguard the Dhamma as the Buddha himself had foreseen, and as Sariputta had once asked. The Buddha had replied, "I know the right time and the right person." That person was Mahakassapa, and that robe, as recorded in the Vinaya Mahavagga, it was no ordinary cloth. It was a symbol, and the beginning of Mahakassapa's true journey. There are moments in the Dhamma so rare, so profound, that even the earth cannot stay silent. This is the story of a robe, not silk, not gold, but simple cloth, exchanged between 2 beings, one fully awakened, the other soon to become his living embodiment. And when that exchange happened, the ground beneath them trembled.
This event is recorded in the Paramattha Jataka, the commentary on the Udana, and affirmed in the Samyutta Nikaya.
The Buddha exchanged his own Sangati, his outer robe, with Venerable Mahākassapa. This was unprecedented, as the texts declare. The Tathagata had never before given his used robe to any disciple. From that day, Mahakassapa fully embraced the 13 Dhutanga practices, ascetic observances designed to uproot craving. Though he practiced all 13 at times, he never abandoned 3. 1. Pamsukula Siva robes made only from discarded cloth. 2. Pindapata, daily alms round, never accepting invitations. 3. Aranyika dwelling in the forest, even when near the Sangha. On the 8th day after ordination, he attained arahantship, complete liberation, endowed with the 4 analytical knowledges, Patisamphita, the 8 liberations, Vimokkha, the 6 higher knowledges, Abhinya. After listening to the Buddha's teaching, he attained Sotapadhi, stream entry, and then ordained as a monk. So when you hear that he became an arahant just 8 days later, it might seem strange, but it's not. He didn't skip stages. In fact, he had already become a Sotapanna before ordaining. According to the Dhamma, the path to arahantship unfolds progressively. One must pass through the stages of Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami, and finally Arahant. Even the Buddha himself followed this sequence during his enlightenment, though his attainment was uniquely complete as a Sammasambuddha, endowed with perfect and universal wisdom that encompasses all knowable things.
This is confirmed in the Kassapa Samyutta and Paramattha Jotaka. The Buddha declared him foremost among disciples in perfect conduct, a title recorded in the Anguttara Nikaya et Tadagavagga.
The Buddha once said of him, "Kassapa, you embody Dhamma itself." He compared him to the moon moving among stars present in the world, yet untouched by it. When Mahakassapa entered a village, he walked with eyes lowered, robes gathered, mind withdrawn. He never sought friendship with householders, never lingered in comfort. Yet his heart overflowed with metta and karuna, loving kindness and compassion. He taught Dhamma not for fame but for others' welfare. And the Buddha instructed all monks, "Take Kassapa as your model. May those who seek gain receive gain. May those who seek punna receive punna. Just as I rejoice in my alms, so too do I rejoice in theirs." Perfect balance, perfect detachment, perfect care.
Even arahants experience physical suffering. As recorded in the Gilana Sutta and Udana, Mahakassapa once fell gravely ill in Pipphali Guha cave near a Pipphali tree outside Rajagaha.
The pain was so intense, he told the Buddha, "I cannot endure it. There is no relief, only worsening." That afternoon, the Buddha walked from Velavana Monastery, the bamboo grove, also known as Kalanta Kanivasa, the peacock sanctuary, and visited him. There, he taught the 7 factors of enlightenment, Sata Bodhanga. 1. Mindfulness, Sati. Investigation of Dhamma, Dhamma Vicaya. 3. Energy Virya. 4. Joy Piti. 5. Tranquility Pasadi. 6. Concentration Samadhi. 7. Equanimity Wupekha. And he declared, when developed and cultivated, these lead directly to profound knowledge, to full awakening, to Nibbana.
This teaching is verbatim from the Bhajanga Samyutta.
Mahakassapa listened intently, and with deep reverence exclaimed, Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu. It is indeed so, my lord. This teaching is the truth of the Dhamma, the very guide to Nibbana. At that very moment his illness vanished. As the commentaries explain, the recitation of the 7 factors of enlightenment, Sata Bhajanga, when heard or reflected upon with a pure and concentrated mind, can dispel physical affliction. In such a state, old or corrupted bodily elements, including blood and cells, are relinquished, and new wholesome ones arise, allowing the disease to cease instantly. However, this does not occur for everyone. It depends entirely on the purity and strength of one's mental state. Mahakassapa, being an arahant, listened with perfect clarity and unwavering faith in the Buddha's words, conditions that made such a miraculous healing possible. This phenomenon is not without precedent. On another occasion, when the Buddha himself was unwell, it was Mahakunda, the younger brother of Sariputta, who recited the 7 factors of enlightenment. Upon hearing them, the Buddha responded, Sadhu, Sadhu, and his illness subsided. Thus, the Sata Bhajanga are not merely theoretical teachings, they are potent instruments of liberation and healing for those whose minds are rightly attuned. After he recovered, Mahakassapa prepared for his alms round. 500 devatas, filled with devotion, appeared and offered him celestial food, pure, fragrant, and radiant, but he respectfully declined. Covering his bowl, he walked instead into the weaver's quarter of Rajagaha, the poorest part of the city, where people struggled just to feed their families. Why did he do that? Not because he rejected generosity, but because he wanted to give ordinary people, especially the poor, a rare chance to make punya. By offering even a simple meal to a noble arahant like him, they could plant seeds of wholesome karma that would bear fruit for lifetimes. True renunciation isn't about receiving, even divine gifts, it's about compassion, creating opportunities for others to give, to let go, and to grow in virtue. Seeing this, the Buddha spoke a spontaneous verse filled with deep wisdom. Someone who doesn't seek food or favors for themselves, who clearly recognizes those truly worthy of offerings, who stands unwavering in the Dhamma, and whose inner defilements, greed, hatred, and delusion are completely gone. That person is what the Tathagata calls a true Brahmana.
This is Udana, preserved in the Hudaka Nikaya. These places are not mythical. Rajagaha, king's abode, flourished only when a Buddha or Kakavati arose. Otherwise, it lay hidden, guarded by yakas, as noted in the Paramatha Jataka. Vaveluvana Kalantakanivasa was once a royal peacock sanctuary. According to legend, a tree deity saved a drunken king by transforming into a peacock and crying out, thus earning the grove its name. Pipphaliga, the cave by the Pipphali tree, is where Mahakassapa faced illness and triumphed through Dhamma.
So Mahakassapa walked, not as a saint on a pedestal, but as a monk in ragged robes, begging in alleyways, sleeping under trees. Yet in that simplicity, he carried the robe of a Buddha, the mind of an arahant, and the heart of a protector of the Dhamma. His life reminds us, perfect conduct isn't the absence of suffering, it's the presence of unwavering virtue, even in its midst. May we walk with the same clarity, may we give without attachment, may we receive without pride, and may our Punna, like Mahakassapa's, shake the world not with noise, but with silence. Another story. Venerable Mahākassapa had just emerged from Nirodha Samapatti, the rare and profound meditative state known as the cessation of perception and feeling. He had entered it intentionally, as only non-returners and arahants can, and remained in that state for the full 7 days, the maximum duration permitted by the nature of this attainment. During those 7 days, his breathing ceased, his mind was utterly still, and he felt neither hunger, thirst, nor any sensation at all. All experience, physical and mental, was suspended, as if temporarily resting in the peace of Nibbana itself. And during that time nothing could harm him. No fire could burn him. No insect or animal could approach. No person, no matter how strong, could move his body. Even if someone tried to strike, soil, or cremate him, as once happened when 500 women, mistaking an arahant for dead during a cold season, piled wood upon him and lit a pyre, not a single hair would be singed, not a thread of his robe stained. The depth of Nirodha Samapatti renders the body inviolable, not by magic, but because all conditions for vulnerability have been temporarily withdrawn. Now back in the world of form and feeling, his body naturally felt hunger, just as anyone's would after a week without food. So at the usual morning hour, he prepared to go on alms round. But his purpose went far beyond nourishment. He walked deliberately into the poorest part of Magadha, the weaver's quarter, where people barely had enough to feed their own families. Why? Because he knew that offering food to an arahant immediately after they emerge from Nirodha Samapatti creates exceptionally powerful punya. This is not magic, it's the natural law of karma. When a giver with pure faith offers to a recipient of supreme purity at this rare moment, the wholesome fruit multiplies beyond ordinary measure. Such an opportunity is extraordinarily rare, like winning the greatest spiritual lottery imaginable. In countless lifetimes, most beings never meet even one arahant, let alone one fresh from the depths of Nirodha Samapatti. There's a famous story in the commentaries. A poor farming couple once gave their last meal, a simple portion of rice, to Venerable Sariputta, right after he emerged from this very state. Though they had nothing left for themselves, their act of faith bore immediate fruit. Gold appeared among the stones in their field. The king honored them as millionaire, and their lives were transformed. Rarest chance, and by the power of punya ripening swiftly due to the purity of the moment. Remembering this truth and knowing how deeply such an act could uplift the poor, Mahakassapa chose the humblest streets over heavenly offerings. He didn't seek comfort. He sought to give the forgotten a chance to plant seeds of fortune that could bloom across lifetimes. So he walked not just to eat but to bless. In that simple alms round he offered the greatest gift, the opportunity to give. After emerging from 7 days in Nirodha Samapatti, Venerable Mahākassapa prepared for his morning alms round. Sakka, Emperor of God, the Tavatimsa Devas, watched from heaven. He remembered clearly the last time Mahakassapa had been ill. Many devas offered him celestial food, but he refused it all, giving it instead to other monks and blessing ordinary people. Turning to his beloved wife Sujata, who always accompanied him wherever he went, as he had promised long ago, he said, if we offer him heavenly food now, he will refuse. But this moment, right after Nirodha Samapatti, is one of the rarest chances to make punya. What should we do? Sujata replied gently, why not appear as an old poor couple living in a broken down house? Mahakassapa is full of compassion. If he sees us as destitute, he may accept and we will gain great merit. They agreed. Using their divine power, they transformed. Sakka became a frail old man, Sujata an aged woman, both dressed in rags, sitting near a crumbling hut in Rajagaha's poorest quarter. Now to be clear, Sakka wasn't lying. In truth, he has countless wives, children, and palaces in the Deva realms. But just as an actor playing a king in a play might say, I rule this land without falsehood because they are speaking within the role, so too was Sakka describing the present condition of the form he had taken. He wasn't denying reality. He was fully inhabiting a temporary appearance for a wholesome purpose. Mahakassapa saw them as he walked by, stooped, trembling, barely able to move. These two are truly pitiful, he thought. It would be good for them to make punya. I'll accept a small offering. He stopped. Sakka, playing the part of the old man, turned slowly to his wife and said, come quickly. This is Venerable Mahakassapa. Do you have anything to offer? From inside, Sujata called out, there is only one piece of rice and some fruits. Sakka hurried forward, bowing slightly. Please, my lord Kassapa, wait. We are old now. Mahakassapa smiled kindly. Never mind. How are you living? Do your children not stay with you? Sakka replied slowly, speaking truthfully within the context of his current appearance. In this state, my children do not stay with me. Mahakassapa thought, perhaps they are too old, or their children have gone far away for work. Moved by compassion, he accepted the offering. As he took the first bite, he knew at once, this food was not human, it was too pure, too fragrant. With a subtle blink, he activated his abhinya and instantly saw their true forms, Sakka and Sujata, radiant in divine splendor. He set down the bowl and asked gently, why did you do this? You are rich beyond measure. Why pretend to be poor and take this chance from those who truly have nothing? Sakka and Sujata bowed. My lord, Sakka said, in the Deva realm, light is everything. Some Devas shine so brightly, their radiance overshadows even mine. Why? Because they made punya at moments like this. Compared to them, we are poor. Mahakassapa looked at them with understanding. Your faith is good. May you both be blessed. But next time do not disguise yourselves. They bowed again, joyful and humbled. Their punya was real, not because of deception, but because of sincere reverence. And so even Sakka, Emperor of the Gods, seeks punya. For in the eyes of the Dhamma, no being human or Deva is ever beyond the need for punya.
This act of humility by Sakka is a key feature of the Dhammapada at Sakkatha,
At Veluvana Mahavihara, the Buddha heard the Udana resound. He called the monks and said, "Monks, look, Saka has just offered alms to Kassapa, my spiritual son, and now ascends in joy." When they asked why Saka revered Mahakassapa so deeply, the Buddha explained, "Both devas and humans hold in high regard those bhikkhus who steadfastly uphold alms round, who sustain themselves without dependence, who are resolute, calm, and ever mindful." Then he recited this verse, "Devas and humans alike revere the bhikkhu who wanders for alms by rule, who supports himself, not others, who is firm, serene, and ever mindful." Then the Buddha added words from the Dhammapada, the scent of sandalwood or tagara, or even the perfume of lotus and jasmine. All these are limited in their reach, but the fragrance of a virtuous person spreads far beyond, pervading both the human world and the deva realms. That fragrance of restraint, compassion, and unwavering conduct was Mahakassapa's true robe.
At the end of this discourse, many in the assembly attained noble fruits. Some became sotapannas, stream enterers, others once returners, non-returners, and even arahants. As the Dhammapada Atsi Katha records, the Dhamma bore immediate fruit because it was spoken in praise of one who embodied it.
When the Buddha prepared to leave Rajagaha after the rain's retreat, he paused and reflected. Many here are devoted to Mahakassapa relatives, supporters, seekers of guidance. The monastery should not be left empty. So he turned to the elder and said gently, "You and your followers should return and remain here." Without hesitation, Mahakassapa bowed and replied, "As the Blessed One wishes." He led his group back, not because he clung to Rajagaha, not because of family or comfort, but because obeying the teacher was his highest practice. Some monks, however, whispered among themselves, "We were right. He won't wander. He's tied to this city." But the Buddha overheard and corrected them firmly. "Do not blame Kassapa. He is not bound by kin, wealth, or place. He returned only out of obedience to my word." This moment, recorded in the Dhammapada Atthakatha, reveals a deep truth. True non-attachment isn't refusing to act, it's acting without self-reference. Mahakassapa moved through the world like a royal swan, Hamsa walking through mud, yet departing completely unstained. His freedom wasn't new, it began long ago in the time of Buddha Padamuttara. As a layman, he saw a monk declared foremost in austere practice, and made a solemn wish, "May I, in a future life under a Buddha like you, become foremost in perfect conduct." That seed planted countless lifetimes ago, blossomed fully in this dispensation. In his own words from the Theragaha, Mahakassapa describes his path. A bhikkhu should not delight in crowds, they disturb the mind. He should not frequent households, affection breeds defilement. Robes, food, shelter, medicine, these are like filth to one who sees clearly. He once received alms from a leper whose swollen hand broke off into the bowl. Leaning against a wall, Mahakassapa ate the meal before, during, and after, feeling no disgust. Why? Because aversion had been uprooted. He found joy not in comfort, but in the wild. Mountains blue as storm clouds, cooled by clear streams, scented with kunda flowers, echoing with elephant cries. These gladden my heart. After alms, I climb the peaks, practice jhana, free from mental fermentations, asavas, cool amidst the heat of worldly beings. And of himself he says simply, a bhikkhu whose mind is undisturbed, wise, master of senses, such a one is worthy of a rag robe like a king of beast in the mountain pass. The Buddha once quoted the Dhammapada to describe such a one. The mindful see danger in every abode. They abandon all clinging, just as the swan leaves the marsh and soars into the sky. For Mahakassapa, this wasn't poetry, it was his daily life. He held no attachment, not to solitude, not to praise, not even to the four requisites. Like the moon passing through constellations, he moved freely, unbound, unshaken, utterly at peace. Even among the Buddha's greatest disciples, reverence flowed freely. The Theragatha tells how 10,000 devas once bowed before Sariputta, calling him general of the Dhamma, and humbly admitted, "We do not know the object of your meditation. Your attainment is too deep for us to see." Venerable Kapina smiled at this. He saw clearly, deep realization commands awe, even from gods. Reflecting on his own life, Mahakassapa spoke with quiet certainty. Throughout this entire Buddha era, no one has practiced the austere Dhutanga virtues more fully than I, except the great sage himself. I have served the teacher. I have followed his instructions completely. I have laid down the heavy burden of suffering. I have uprooted tanha, the craving that fuels rebirth. He praised the Buddha with devotion. Gautama is immeasurable in virtue, unattached to robes, food, or shelter, like a lotus, unstained by mud, untouched by water. Mindfulness is his crown, faith his right hand, wisdom his head, and great knowledge his eyes. Yet not everyone could receive such teaching. Mahakassapa observed wisely. Words that are noble, beneficial, and joyful to the wise are like poison to fools. The foolish mistake what is useless for what is essential, like a farmer who shelters a venomous snake, thinking it kind. This truth played out even in his own presence. At Pipphali Cave, 2 young monks served Venerable Mahākassapa. One served with quiet sincerity. The other loved praise and constantly claimed credit for the good deeds of his companion. One evening, the sincere monk heated bath water but placed only a small bowl of warm water on the hearth to create a little steam, then hid the actual pot behind the bathing chamber. The deceitful monk saw the vapor rush to Mahakassapa and announced proudly, "Venerable sir, the bath is ready in the chamber, please come now." But as soon as the elder stood up, the deceitful monk, realizing his mistake, shouted in panic, "Look at this stubborn fool! He left an empty bowl on the fire and disappeared. I assumed the hot water was already inside, that's why I told you it was ready." So loudly did he complain that others heard him. In anger, he seized the large pot and carried it off toward the river. Moments later, the sincere monk quietly brought the real hot water and placed it inside the bathing chamber. Now Mahakassapa, an arahant who sees all things clearly, had known the truth from the start. But out of compassion, he let the scene unfold. Only then did he reflect aloud, "This young monk urged me to come, saying the water was ready, yet immediately dragged the pot away. How can this be?" With mindful observation, he confirmed what he already knew. This monk has long been stealing credit for another's virtue. That evening, when the deceitful monk came to sit before him, Mahakassapa spoke gently but firmly. "A bhikkhu should speak only of what he himself has done. You said the bath is ready, yet ran off with the pot. This is not the conduct of one gone forth in the Buddha's dispensation. Such behavior is unworthy of a samana." His words were not born of anger but of compassion, to protect the Dhamma, to uphold integrity, and to give the wayward monk a chance to turn back. But the young monk, attached to flattery, grew furious. "Over something as small as water he criticizes me." The next day he refused to accompany Mahakassapa on alms round. When the elder left, the monk went to the elder's lay supporter and lied. "The venerable one is unwell and cannot sit comfortably." He instructed them to prepare special food, then ate it all himself on the way back. Later, when Mahakassapa visited the same household, the supporter asked kindly, "We sent food for you, did you receive it? Are you feeling better?" The elder remained silent, not out of suspicion, but because truth needs no defense. Back at the monastery, Mahakassapa gently confronted the monk. "I heard you solicited food and ate it yourself. Is this true? Such conduct is unworthy of a bhikkhu." Enraged, the monk thought, "He favors others. He gave fine cloth to that monk, but scolds me for nothing. I'll get revenge." The next morning, while Mahakassapa was away, the monk smashed every bowl, destroyed the library, set fire to the buildings, and fled. When he died, he fell into Avitsi hell, not because Mahakassapa cursed him, but because of his own greed, deceit, and hatred. People began to talk. One of Mahakassapa's monks couldn't bear even gentle advice and destroyed the monastery in rage. Around that time, a monk traveling from Rajagaha met the Buddha at Jetavana. The Buddha asked, "Has Mahakassapa, my son, been able to endure?" "He has, Lord," but one monk, angered by mere words of advice, burned the library and fled. The Buddha replied, "This is not new. In past lives too he reacted the same way." Then the Buddha recounted this past life story. Long ago, in the time of King Brahmadatta of Varanasi, a monkey lived in the Himavanta forest. He built a snug little nest in the fork of a tree. One day, heavy rain fell. A crow, drenched and shivering, took shelter beneath the same tree. Seeing the monkey dry and safe in his nest, the crow called out mockingly, "Hey monkey, your hands and feet are like a human's, why don't you build yourself a proper shelter?" The monkey replied gently but wisely, "Though our limbs resemble those of humans, we lack their greatest quality, steady resolve. If the mind is fickle, weak, easily swayed by every wind, how can one build a lasting home? Therefore strengthen your discipline, cultivate constancy, build a hut not just from leaves, but from virtue and mindfulness." But the crow, hearing this, thought, "He's calling me fickle-minded, weak-willed, unsteady." Enraged by this gentle advice, he flew up and tore the monkey's nest to pieces, scattering it in the wind. The monkey, calm and undisturbed, watched silently as the crow flew away. After telling this story, the Buddha revealed the truth. Monks, the crow of that time is the very monk who, angered by gentle admonishment, burned down the monastery. The monkey who spoke wisely and endured destruction without hatred is none other than Venerable Mahākassapa in this present life. Then the Buddha said, "It is not only now that this bhikkhu, when corrected with kindness, responded with violence and destroyed a dwelling. He did the same in the past. And know this, Mahakassapa's choice to dwell alone is far superior to living with foolish companions." And he uttered this verse, Dhammapada 61. "If while seeking a true spiritual friend, one finds neither a superior nor an equal, let one walk alone composed and resolute. For there is no fellowship in virtue among the foolish." At the end of this discourse, the visiting monk attained Sotapadhi. Many others in the assembly also realized the Dhamma, some even reaching higher stages. Thus the teaching brought great benefit to all. Why this matters? The monkey is Mahakassapa, wise, patient, unshaken. The crow is the deceitful monk, proud, reactive, destructive when corrected. The lesson isn't about who said what, but how one responds to truth. This aligns perfectly with your emphasis. True practice isn't a performance, it's how the heart reacts when challenged. And yes, as recorded in the Kassapa Samyutta.
This conversation appears in the Samyutta Nikaya. It shows how Venerable Mahākassapa's simple, austere life wasn't just personal preference, it was a teaching in itself.
One quiet afternoon at Velavana Monastery near Ragaha, the elderly Venerable Mahākassapa came to see the Buddha. His body was thin, his robe stitched from discarded cloth, rough and heavy with age. Seeing this, the Buddha gently said, "Kassapa, you are old now. Why not wear softer robes given by lay people? Accept meal invitations. Rest in my own dwelling." But Mahākassapa bowed and replied with quiet conviction, "Lord, for many years I've lived in the forest, walked for alms, worn rag robes, kept only 3 robes, stayed content with little and cherished solitude. These practices bring me peace and I praise them." The Buddha asked, "What benefit do you see in this way of life?" Mahākassapa answered simply, "2, Venerable Sir. First, I live happily right now, seeing the Dhamma clearly. Second, I leave a path behind, so future generations will know." In the Buddha's time, his awakened disciples lived simply, walked for alms, and found joy in letting go. The Buddha smiled. "Well said, Kassapa. You practice not just for yourself, but for the good of all beings. So keep your rag robes, keep walking for alms, keep dwelling in the forest." And so he did not out of hardship, but out of deep care for the future of the Dhamma.
Mahākassapa's life reminds us, true simplicity isn't about giving up things, it's about making space for wisdom and offering others a living example of freedom. The Sarathapaka, the ancient commentary on the Samyutta Nikaya, it reveals that Mahākassapa's rag robe wasn't just any old cloth, it was a sacred symbol exchanged with the Buddha himself at the moment of his ordination.
Long before that quiet talk at Velavana, something extraordinary happened. When Mahākassapa first went forth, he was still a wealthy man in fine robes. But the Buddha walked nearly 10 kilometers with him, past fields and forests, until they stopped beneath a great tree halfway to Nalanda. There the Buddha gave him full ordination, and then did something rare. He took off his own robe, worn, simple, stitched from cast-off cloth, and exchanged it for Mahākassapa's elegant lay garment. From that very moment, Mahākassapa was marked as the living embodiment of renunciation. Years later, when the Buddha gently suggested he give up his heavy rag robe and live more comfortably, it wasn't because the practice was wrong. Quite the opposite. The Buddha knew that if no one asked, such a profound way of life might go unspoken. So he created the perfect moment for Mahākassapa to rise and declare, with clarity and conviction, "I praise forest dwelling, I praise alms round, I praise contentment." It was a king of beasts roar, not of pride, but of compassion. A voice meant to echo through centuries, reminding future monks, this path is possible, this peace is real. And the Buddha, he smiled, not because he needed convincing, but because the world needed to hear it.
The Buddha didn't oppose austerity, he honored it by giving it a voice. And through Mahākassapa, that voice still speaks today. This account is drawn from the Manaratthapurani and Paramatthaddipani, the classical commentaries on the Anguttara Nikaya and Theragatha. It traces Mahākassapa's aspiration to become foremost in austere practice all the way back to the time of Buddha Padamuttara over countless lifetimes ago.
Long ago in the time of Buddha Padamuttara, a wealthy young Brahmin named Vedaha lived in the radiant city of Hamsavati. One morning, after taking the Uposatha precepts, he brought flowers, incense, and lamps to the monastery where the Buddha was staying. There he heard the Buddha declare, "Monks, this Bhikkhu Mahānassabha is supreme in the Dhutanga practices." Vedaha's heart lit up. He immediately invited the Buddha and the entire Sangha, over 6 million monks, to a feast at his home. And he meant everyone, even the youngest Samaneras. The next day, as the Sangha gathered, Venerable Mahānassabha walked past Vedaha's house on alms round. Vedaha rushed out, bowl in hand, urging him to join the meal inside. But the elder gently refused. It is not fitting for me to enter any home for food. Undeterred, Vedaha filled his bowl with the finest offerings right there on the street. Back inside, he turned to the Buddha and asked, almost in awe, Lord, could this monk's virtue possibly surpass even yours? The Buddha smiled, not with pride but with perfect clarity, and explained, I dwell near villages. He dwells only in the forest. I accept meals in homes. He walks for alms and never sits waiting. His path is one of utmost renunciation. That moment changed Vedaha forever. His faith blazed like a lamp drenched in oil. He thought, I don't want wealth or heavenly bliss. In some future life, under a future Buddha, may I be just like Mahākassapa, the foremost in austerity. For 7 days he fed the entire Saṅgha. On the last day he offered fresh robes to every single monk. Then standing before the Buddha he made his solemn wish, may all the punna from these acts, not for Deva realms, not for power, but so that in a future Buddha's time I become the foremost disciple in Dhutanga practice. That young man Vedaha would one day be reborn as Venerable Mahākassapa, and his vow came true.
This story shows that great spiritual attainments aren't accidents. They've reborn from deep intention, purified by generosity, and fulfilled across lifetimes through unwavering resolve. This account comes from the Apadana in the Khuddaka Nikaya, along with supporting details from the commentaries. After hearing Buddha Padumuttara's prophecy that he would one day become Mahakassapa, foremost in Dhutanga practice, Vedaha didn't rest on hope alone. He lived it. Every day he practiced generosity, kept pure conduct, and nurtured unwavering faith. But his devotion reached its peak after the Buddha passed away. When news of Buddha Padumuttara's parinibbana spread, many wept in sorrow. Vedaha, however, felt a bright urgency, not despair, but inspiration. He gathered his family and friends and declared, the great hero has entered final peace. Let us honor him with an offering that echoes through the heavens. He gave away vast wealth to build a stupa 100 cubits high to enshrine the Buddha's relics. Some accounts say it rose 7 yojanas into the sky. Above it he erected a crystal pavilion, glowing like a second sun, radiating light in all directions. He bowed before it with a purified heart, offered flowers, lit lamps, and performed countless acts of reverence. Not for fame, not for reward, but out of deep gratitude for the Dhamma. The result? At death he was reborn in Tavatimsa heaven as Vedaha Devaputta. His celestial mansion soared 7 yojanas high, crowned with 1,000 golden spires that lit up the world. Around it, jeweled halls and crystal dwellings appeared spontaneously, gifts of his own Punna. Yet even in such splendor, he never forgot his vow. Life after life he returned only to human or heavenly realms, never falling low, until at last he met our Buddha Gautama and fulfilled his destiny as Venerable Mahākassapa, the living embodiment of renunciation. This rich account is drawn from the Manaratha Purani and Paramatha Dipani, detailing how the being who would become Venerable Mahākassapa cultivated Punna across lifetimes.
Long before he became Mahākassapa, this devoted being lived many lives, each shaped by wisdom and giving. In one life he ruled as King of Pada, a Kakavati monarch, whose capital Ramana was so vast and vibrant it mirrored the heavens. He reigned for 60,000 years and did so not once, but 30 times, always rejoicing in the fruits of his past kusala deeds. But perhaps his most touching rebirth came during the time of Buddha Vipassi, when he and his wife were so poor they owned only one robe between them. They became known as the Ekasataka Brahmins, the couple with a single garment. Only one could go out at a time. On the rare day Buddha Vipassi gave a discourse, once every 7 years. The wife went in the morning. That night her husband wrapped himself in their one robe and stood at the edge of the crowd, listening. 3 times the thought arose, I should offer this robe to the Buddha. Twice, stinginess whispered, but then we'll be trapped at home. But in the final watch of the night his heart broke free. He stepped forward, placed the robe at the Buddha's feet and cried out, Jitamme, I have won. Not a battle over land, but over greed itself. King Bantuma, hearing this, was stunned. What victory is this? He asked. The Brahmin replied, I conquered my own clinging, the hardest enemy of all. Moved, the king sent fine robes as gifts, but each time the Brahmin offered them back to the Buddha, until he kept only 2, one for himself, one for his wife. Later, when the king gave him a priceless crimson shawl, the Brahmin didn't wear it. He draped it over the Buddha's resting place. By morning, touched by the Buddha's aura, it glowed with divine light. From that day the king honored him as his chief spiritual advisor, and the Brahmin spent his life building alms halls, feeding the poor and keeping pure precepts. In yet another life, as a merchant named Sumita, he met a Pachaka Buddha sewing a too-short robe by a river. Without hesitation, Sumita gave his own fine clothes and made a wish, "May I never be born where there is lack." Through lifetimes of such acts, sometimes grand, sometimes quiet, his Punna grew like a river gathering streams. And when our Buddha Gautama arose, that same being was reborn as Venerable Mahākassapa, austere, fearless, and forever foremost in perfect conduct.
Mahakassapa's story teaches us that awakening isn't sudden. It's woven over lifetimes, stitch by stitch, through generosity, courage, and the willingness to give even what you think you cannot spare. This intricate narrative, drawn from the Manoratha Purani and Paramatha Dipani, traces the comic journey of the couple who would become Venerable Mahākassapa and Bhaddakapilani Theri.
In a past life during the time of Buddha Kassapa, the future Mahakassapa and Bhaddakapilani were reborn as a wealthy merchant's son and daughter in Varanasi. Though destined for each other, their union failed 7 times each time the bride stepped into the groom's home. A foul stench erupted from her body, forcing her return. Why? In an earlier life, she had out of jealousy dumped mud into a Pachaka Buddha's alms bowl. Though she later repented, cleaned the bowl and offered pure food with a heartfelt wish for beauty and fragrance, the residual karma of that moment of anger still ripened as humiliation. But because her repentance was genuine and her Punna strong, she was never cast aside. Each time she returned with honor, and eventually the comic obstacle faded. Later both made vast offerings to Buddha Kassapa's stupa. She melted her finest ornaments into a single golden brick, placed it perfectly where it was needed, and wished, "May my body always smell of sandalwood, my breath of lotus." Her aspiration took root. In another life, he, guided by that same Punna, lay down on the royal auspicious stone just as the kingdom searched for a new king. The royal chariot, drawn by white horses, circled him 3 times. He awoke, accepted kingship, and became King Nanda Raja, the joyful king, whose touch summoned wish-fulfilling trees from the earth. His queen, his former wife, reminded him, "Great wealth comes from past Punna, but without new giving, future happiness fades." So they invited Pachaka Buddhas, fed them, and built them 500 huts in the royal park. But when the king went to quell a rebellion, all 500 Pachaka Buddhas passed into parinibbana. The queen, heartbroken, honored them with a grand stupa. When the king returned and heard the news, he was struck by the truth. Even the noblest are not beyond death. That very day he ordained. His queen soon followed. Both attained deep jhana and were reborn in the Brahma realms. And when our Buddha Gautama arose, they descended once more not as king and queen, but as Venerable Mahākassapa and Bhaddakapilani Theri. He foremost in austere conduct, she foremost in wisdom among bhikkhunis. Their story is not one of perfection, but of return. Returning to generosity after anger, to faith after doubt, to the path after every fall.
This tale reveals the Buddha's teaching in action. Karma is real, but not fate. Through sincere effort, even the heaviest regrets can be transformed, and the deepest aspirations fulfilled. This account is drawn from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, Digha Nikaya, and its commentary, the Sumangala Vilasini. It shows how Venerable Mahākassapa, though silent during the Buddha's life, stepped forward at the most critical moment to protect the Dhamma.
After the Buddha's parinibbana, a deep stillness fell over the world. In Kusinara, the Mallas had placed the Blessed One's body on a grand sandalwood bier, but no matter how they tried, the funeral pyre would not ignite. At that very time, Venerable Mahākassapa was traveling from Pava with 500 bhikkhus. At noon, they paused beneath a tree to rest. There he saw a wandering ascetic approaching, using a huge mandarava flower as a sunshade, a rare blossom said to appear only at the 8 most sacred moments in a Buddha's life. Mahākassapa understood at once. The teacher has passed into parinibbana. He asked gently, "Friend, do you know anything about our Blessed One?" "Yes," the man replied. 7 days ago the Samana Gautama entered parinibbana. I took this flower from the site." The news struck like thunder. Bhikkhus who had not yet eradicated defilements wept openly, as though their limbs were being torn away. But among them stood an elderly newly ordained monk named Sapada, who snapped, "Enough! We're finally free of that great ascetic. Now we can do as we please." Mahākassapa heard but said nothing. Instead, he turned to the grieving monks and reminded them softly, "Did the Buddha not teach from the very beginning that all conditioned things are impermanent? Whatever arises must pass away. This is the nature of existence." When they arrived in Kusinara, the pyre remained unlit. The Devas, it was later explained, had willed it so. They wished to wait for Mahākassapa, the one destined to uphold the sasana, to arrive and pay his final respects. He approached the bier, adjusted his robe over one shoulder, and walked around it 3 times in reverence. Then, drawing on the power of his deep jhana, he made a silent determination. May the Blessed One's feet become visible and rest upon my head. Instantly, the Buddha's feet emerged from beneath the 500 layers of fine cloth, not by physical removal, but through the power of his meditative attainment, and touched Mahakassapa's head. He bowed in profound devotion. The 500 bhikkhus followed his example. The moment their homage was complete, the pyre burst into flame by itself, without spark or hand. Later, some wondered, if Mahakassapa already knew the Buddha had passed, why ask the ascetic? Because he wanted the monks to hear the news before seeing the body, so their grief, though deep, wouldn't overwhelm their faith. As for Sappata, his harsh words came from old resentment. Before ordaining, he'd been a barber in Attama. Once eager to make merit, he prepared a lavish meal for the Buddha and sent his young sons to collect donations from villagers. But because he'd orchestrated the offering in ways that pressured people, the Buddha declined it and forbade the Sangha from partaking. Humiliated, Sappata never let go of that disappointment. And when the Buddha was gone, that long-held bitterness surfaced as scorn. But Mahakassapa, he didn't react with anger. He honored the teacher with silence, humility, and unwavering devotion, and in doing so became the guardian who ensured the Dhamma would live on for generations to come.
Mahakassapa's strength wasn't in speech but in presence, in knowing when to act, when to bow, and how to hold the Dhamma steady when the world trembled. His reverence lit the fire that preserved the Buddha's teachings for us today. This account is drawn from the Kalavaga of the Vinaya Pitaka and its commentaries, the Samantapasadika and Sumangalavallasini. It details how Venerable Mahākassapa, moved by foresight and devotion, convened the first Buddhist council to safeguard the Dhamma at the very moment it was most vulnerable. The moment Mahākassapa heard Subhada's words, "We're free now. We can do as we please," his heart sank, not with anger but with clarity. Even 7 days after the Buddha's parinibbana, he thought, corruption has already begun. If this spreads, the teaching could vanish entirely. But he didn't scold Subhada on the spot. He knew, if disciples quarreled while the Buddha's body still lay uncremated, people would lose faith in the Sangha itself. So he stayed silent, yet inwardly resolved to act. That resolve became the seed of the first Sangayana, the great recitation that would preserve the Buddha's words for centuries. 5 reflections guided him. First, Subhada's words were a warning sign. Second, the Buddha had said, "After my passing, let the Dhamma and Vinaya be your teacher." That meant they must be preserved exactly, completely. Third, the Buddha had given him his own patched outer robe, a symbol like a king passing his crown to his heir. Fourth, he had mastered deep meditative attainments and the 6 higher knowledges, making him spiritually ready to lead. Fifth, the Buddha had once declared, through Kassapa, the true Dhamma will endure long in the world. 2 days after the cremation, 700 arahants gathered in Kusinara for the relic distribution. Seeing them, Mahakassapa knew the time had come. He addressed the assembly. "You've heard how Subhada mocked our teacher's discipline. This isn't just foolishness, it's danger. If we don't act now, false views will spread and the true Dhamma will fade." He proposed a formal recitation of the entire teaching, so what is authentic would be remembered, and what is not would not take root. The Sangha agreed. They chose 499 fully enlightened monks, each expert in the 3 Pitskas. 1 seat was left open for Venerable Ananda, who had not yet attained arahantship but held every word the Buddha ever spoke. They decided to hold the council in Rajagaha, where the Buddha first taught widely, and where King Ajatasattu would support them. For 7 months during the rain's retreat, they sealed themselves in retreat near Sattapaṇṇi Cave on Mount Devahara. Mahakassapa presided. Venerable Pali, foremost in Vinaya, recited the monastic rules. Venerable Ananda, keeper of the discourses, recited the suttas and later the Abhidhamma. And so through wisdom, unity, and unwavering care, the Dhamma was saved, not as memory but as living truth. This account is drawn from the Kalavaga and commentaries like the Sumangalavallasini. It shows how Venerable Mahākassapa not only preserved the Buddha's teachings in the 3 Pitsakas, but also safeguarded his physical relics, ensuring both the Dhamma and the Buddha's legacy would endure.
After the Buddha's parinibbana, the teaching stood at a crossroads. But thanks to Venerable Mahākassapa, it did not scatter. It was gathered, verified, and sealed in truth. At the first Saṅgha held in the Sattapaṇṇi Cave near Rajagaha, 500 fully enlightened bhikkhus, all arahants, each declared by the Buddha as foremost in specific attainments, came together. This was no ordinary gathering. It was a sacred act of preservation, guided by urgency, wisdom, and unwavering fidelity to the teacher's words. In the center of the assembly, an empty seat was placed for the Buddha, not as decoration, but as a solemn reminder. He alone is our teacher. His words are the standard. Venerable Mahākassapa presided, not as a ruler, but as the guardian entrusted with the sasana. He did not recite, he asked, For the Vinaya Pitaka, he turned to Venerable Pipphali, whom the Buddha had named foremost in monastic discipline. Point by point, Mahakassapa questioned him, Pipphali, why did the Buddha establish this rule? And Pipphali replied with precision, the exact incident, the monk involved, the place, the time, and the wording of the rule, down to the last syllable. Venerable Ananda, who had memorized every discourse the Buddha ever gave, sat nearby, not as a speaker but as witness. When it came time for the Sutta and Abhidhamma Pitakas, Ananda recited them word for word. The entire assembly, arahants with flawless memory and liberated minds, listened and verified. If even a single word differed, they paused until it was resolved. No room for error, no room for opinion. The result, the 3 Pitakas perfectly organized. The Vinaya Pitaka, 21,000 units of discipline, in 5 books, Parajika Pakitya, Mahavaga Kulavaga Paravara. The Sutta Pitaka, 21,000 discourses in 5 Nikayas Diga, Majjhima Samyutta Anguttara, Khuddaka. The Abhidhamma Pitaka, 42,000 profound teachings on mind and reality in 7 books, Dhammasangani, Vibhanga Dhatukatha, and so on. Together, 84,000 Dhammakandas, the complete path to liberation, preserved exactly as the Buddha taught. Now what about the commentaries? Some assume they were added later as personal views. That's a serious misunderstanding. The Atthakatha commentaries, like the Samanta Pasadika, contain explanations that existed from the Buddha's time passed down orally alongside the canon. But during the First Council, time was short. The priority was to secure the root text, the actual words spoken by the Buddha. Background stories like that of a queen's servant who once stole money meant for flowers, then later became a devoted lay supporter, were part of the living tradition, but not recited aloud then. They were preserved separately in the commentary stream because they help clarify meaning, but only after the core teaching was fixed. Later, when teachings were endangered by war or decline, Ika sub-commentaries were composed, not as new ideas, but as structured guides to protect what was already there. And yes, monastic scholars counted every word, tracked syllables, measured lines, and mapped how sections formed books. This wasn't academic rigor, it was spiritual responsibility, because if the Dhamma is distorted, the path is lost. That's why only arahants participated. Only those free from craving, aversion, and delusion could transmit the teaching without bias. But Mahakassapa didn't stop at words. Knowing future generations would need more than texts, they'd need a living connection. He turned to the Buddha's relics. He approached King Ajatasattu and said, "May your majesty be blessed. Let us enshrine the relics through a Dhatu Nidaha, a sacred burial, to protect them for ages." The king agreed. Mahakassapa retrieved relics from 7 cities, but left the relics at Ramagrama untouched. Why? Because he foresaw that Naga kings would one day venerate them and carry them safely to their realm, preserving them until humans in Sri Lanka would enshrine them in the great stupa centuries later. Back in Rajakaha, at the southeastern edge of the city, Mahakassapa made a solemn resolution. May this ground become pure earth, no stones, no flooding, forever protected. King Ajatasattu honored this by building a great stupa on that very spot, not only for the Buddha's relics but also to honor the 80 chief disciples. Thus Mahakassapa secured 2 legacies, the Dhamma through precise, word-perfect recitation, the relics through far-sighted compassion, not for fame, not for praise, but so that even today, 2,500 years later, anyone who seeks the path can find it clear, intact, and alive.
The First Council was not the beginning of interpretation, it was the end of uncertainty. And the commentaries, they are not embellishments, but the careful keys that unlock the depth of what was preserved. Together they form a lineage of truth, guarded by arahants, tested by time and offered to us with boundless compassion. This account of the relic enshrinement is drawn from the Thupavamsa, Mahavamsa, and the commentarial tradition, particularly the Samantapasadika and Vimativinodani. It describes how King Ajatasattu, under Mahakassapa's guidance, completed the Dhatunida with meticulous ritual, celestial aid, and prophetic vision, culminating in a stupa that sealed the relics in silence for future generations.
After the Buddha's parinibbana, Venerable Mahakassapa knew the Dhamma must be preserved in word and the relics in earth. He approached King Ajatasattu, who though once stained by grave karma, now offered his entire kingdom to honor the teacher. Together they began the Dhatu Nidaha, the sacred burial of the Buddha's bodily relics. The excavation reached 80 cubits deep. The king lined the base with metal, then commissioned an astonishing sequence of nested caskets and shrines made from 10 sacred substances: yellow sandalwood, red sandalwood, ivory, crystal, gold, silver, cat's eye gemstone, beryl, sapphire, lapis lazuli, falika. For each material, 8 concentric caskets were crafted, each slightly larger than the one before, nesting like cosmic shells. These were placed inside 8 corresponding shrines, also layered concentrically. The process began with the tiniest yellow sandalwood casket into which the Buddha's relics were reverently placed. Around it, layer upon layer rose until all 8 yellow sandalwood caskets sat within 8 shrines. Then came red sandalwood, ivory, crystal, all the way to lapis lazuli, whose outermost shrine stood as tall as the great stupa at Thuparama. Around this central shrine, the king built 7 crystal pavilions, each from a different celestial crystal. Then a golden pavilion encased in silver, and finally an outer bronze pavilion like armor forged from devotion. On the roof he spread crystal sand, ground from the 7 kinds of crystal, shimmering like frozen starlight. And all around he arranged flowers, land and water blooms alike to remain in perpetual bloom, never wilting, never fading. He commissioned golden statues of the 550 past lives of the Bodhisattva, the 80 great disciples, King Suddhodana, Queen Mahamaya, and the 7 co-born princes. He also placed 500 golden and 500 silver water vessels, filled to the brim, 500 golden banners, 500 golden and 500 silver lamps burning with fragrant oil, and fine dukkha lavastra cloth, the highest quality, as ceremonial offerings. Then Venerable Mahākassapa made a solemn adititsana. May these offerings, flowers, scents, and lights never fade, decay, or be extinguished. May their beauty, scent, and radiance remain undiminished for ages. On a golden plaque he inscribed a prophecy. In future times Prince Asoka will become King Asoka the Great, and he shall distribute these very relics throughout the world. When the enshrinement was complete, King Ajatasattu performed the final acts of veneration. He then ordered each door from the innermost shrine to the outermost bronze pavilion to be sealed with locks, bolts, and royal seals, layer by layer. At the very center he placed a great precious gemstone, inscribed with words of boundless compassion. If a poor and humble king arises in the future, let him take this gem and use it to make offerings to all the Buddha's relics. Then Sakka summoned Vissakama, the celestial architect, and commanded, "Guard this sacred site." Vissakama descended and forged a fearsome mechanical guardian, a terrifying automaton wielding a lapis lazuli-hued sword, circling the chamber at wind-like speed, radiating such dread that even the bravest would shudder. He activated it with a single master key, then built a fortress of massive stone slabs around the entire structure, covered it with a great capstone, and leveled the earth above until no trace remained. Finally, he erected one stone stupa directly above the chamber, silent, unmarked, yet radiant with Punna completing the Dhatu Nidaha, the solemn interment of the Buddha's bodily relics. Thus the relics were not hidden out of secrecy, but preserved out of love. Hidden not to be lost, but to be found at the right time by the right heart for the sake of the world.
This stupa was more than stone, it was a vow in form. And centuries later, when King Asoka unearthed it, that vow bore fruit. The relics went forth, the Dhamma spread, and beings awakened. All because Mahakassapa, Ajatasattu, and Sakka refused to let the light go out. This account of Venerable Mahakassapa's final days is drawn from the Mahasavaka Nibbana, the Sumangala Vilasini, and related commentarial sources. It records not only his passing, but his extraordinary resolution to preserve his body until the time of Metteyya Buddha, ensuring that his life of perfect conduct would continue to inspire beings across aeons.
In his final days, Venerable Mahakassapa dwelled at Veluvana Mahavihara in Ragaha age, revered, yet never softened in his practice. Like salt that never loses its taste, he upheld the Dhutanga ascetic practices to the very end. One morning, emerging from deep meditative absorption, Phala Samapati, he turned his mind to the nature of this body. I am now very old, how much longer will it last? Through insight he saw clearly. This very day I shall attain parinibbana. He chose his place, Kukuta Sambata Parvata, the Cox Assembly Mountain, a sacred cluster of 3 peaks near Ragaha. There he would complete his journey. Gathering the Sangha, he gave his final exhortation. Friends, do not be negligent. Strive diligently in accordance with the Blessed One's teachings. As for me, my time has come. This evening I enter parinibbana. The junior monks wept. The arahants reflected in silence. All sanghas are impermanent. Only when they cease is true peace found. To comfort them, Mahakassapa reminded them of the Buddha's timeless truth. Whatever is born must pass away. Follow the path of the noble ones and you shall be freed. Then he added, if you wish to witness my parinibbana, gather this evening at Kukuta Sambata. But before departing he remembered King Ajatasattu, the royal patron who had supported the First Council and enshrined the relics. At midday, while the king rested, Mahakassapa entered the palace. The courtiers, sensing something profound, bowed and asked why he had come. I have come to bid farewell, he said. This evening I enter Parinibbana at the cleft between the 3 peaks of Kukutasambhata. He returned to Veluvana, performed his final monastic duties with perfect care, knowing he would never return, and then led the Sangha to the mountain. There, before entering final Nibbana, he displayed a great Ittipatiharya, a miraculous display of psychic power to awaken faith and clarity in all who watched. He gave one last teaching, urging them to protect the Dhamma with unwavering diligence. Then he entered the fruit of Nibbana, the supreme bliss. But he emerged once more. For one final act of compassion, he made a solemn addition. May these 3 mountains draw together into one, enclosing a chamber within, and may the offering flowers placed here never wither or fade. And then a deeper vow, one that stretched across time itself. May my body remain intact until the arising of Arya Metteyya Sammasambuddha, the future Buddha. May King Ajatasattu witness my last visible form, even after Parinibbana. He foresaw that when Metteyya appears, 12 yojanas, about 96 kilometers, of bhikkhus will gather at that very mountain. The future Buddha will place his right hand upon Mahakassapa's preserved body and declare, this elder was supreme in upholding the 13 Dhutanga practices, from ordination until final Nibbana. At that moment, flames will arise from within the body, consuming it completely, leaving only pure relics in Metteyya's palm. Those relics will be enshrined in a stupa, becoming an object of veneration throughout the next dispensation. Back in Rajagaha, King Ajatasattu awoke to the news. Overwhelmed by grief, he fainted 3 times. When he recovered, he ordered the royal victory drums sounded across the city, and marched forth with the 4-fold army, elephants, cavalry, chariots, and infantry to Kukutasambha. There, standing before the cleft between the 3 peaks, he saw the elder's body, miraculously preserved. He made a Sakadishana, a truth resolution. By the power of this elder's virtue, may a miracle manifest for the benefit of all beings. Instantly, the entire assembly beheld the same wonder. Tears flowed, not just from sorrow, but from awe. For 7 days and nights, the king and people honored the body with grand offerings. Only then did he return to Rajagaha, his heart heavy, yet uplifted by unshakable faith. Thus concludes the life of Venerable Mahākassapa, guardian of the First Council, protector of the relics, and preserver of the sasana. His story is not legend, it is living instruction. Hold fast to the Dhamma, uphold the Vinaya, practice with diligence, protect the teaching through conduct, not words alone. May all who hear this account take it to heart, walk in his footsteps, and thereby fulfill their own highest good, and contribute to the enduring radiance of the true Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddha. The biography of Venerable Mahākassapa, concluded.